Origin Unexplained.
Welcome back. This is part 2 of our journey into the coldest, strangest, and most secretive place on Earth, Antarctica. From pulsing signals recorded from the sky to unnatural shapes cut into the ice to warm caverns and lost expeditions, this episode takes you even further into the unknown, and this is part 2 of the Antarctica series, and the ice is starting to crack. When World War II was at its height, Hitler's obsession with mysticism and lost civilizations wasn't just legends, it was policy. The Nazis sent expeditions across the globe searching for artifacts and power sources they believed could secure dominion over the world. Most people have heard of the ones in Tibet, Egypt, and the Arctic, but few realize one of the most secretive was in Antarctica, in a sector they renamed Neuschwabenland. In 1938, the German vessel Schwabenland sailed south under the command of Captain Alfred Richer. Officially, it was a scientific and whaling expedition. Unofficially, it carried members of the Honorb and Heinrich Himmler's occult research division. Their orders were to survey the area, map the coastline, and claim territory for the Reich. They dropped aluminum flags marked with swastikas across the frozen terrain, but reports from declassified documents and later whispers from intelligence circles suggest that's not all they left behind. Nope. Rumors persist that they discovered an enormous ice-free valley heated by geothermal vents beneath the ice shelf and possibly even ancient ruins buried under millennia of glacial buildup. So, some accounts claim they began constructing an underground base there called Base 211, a supposed fortress where experimental aircraft and advanced propulsion technologies were hidden away far from Allied bombers. After the war, something strange happened. Multiple U-boats surrendered months after Germany's official defeat. Two of them, U-530 and U-977, emerged in Argentina after suspiciously long unaccounted for voyages. Both captains refused to explain where they'd been. This fueled the theory that they had ferried Nazi leaders, aid or secret cargo to Antarctic stronghold. Then came Operation High Jump in 46 through 47. And that was actually led by Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd. Officially, it was a U.S. Navy mission to test and experiment in extreme conditions. Unofficially, it was a massive military force with over 4,000 men, aircraft, and warships, as mentioned in Part 1, headed directly for Antarctica. Byrd's own statements upon returning added fuel to the fire. He warned that America must prepare to defend itself against the enemy aircraft. They can fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. And I will get into that in a bit. That question cuts right to the heart of the high jump mystery, and it's one that's haunted researchers ever since. Byrd made that statement. So how could any aircraft in 1947 move from pole to pole at incredible speeds? On the surface, it sounds impossible, but several theories ranging from advanced Nazi technology to the very structure of the Earth itself try to make sense of it. The first theory points to the Nazi Honbo and Vril craft programs. If anybody's even familiar with Vril technology, you can Google that. Documents and testimonies that surfaced after the war, many from captured scientists, described disc-shaped aircraft allegedly developed by the Nazis in the early 1940s. These were called the Honbo 1, 2, and 3, and the Vril 1 Jaeger. They were supposedly powered by a revolutionary electromagnetic gravitic engine. The name? The Thule Tachyonator 7, which I find very interesting because I'm big into tachyon stuff, and also tachyon organ. It's said to have used counter-rotating magnetic fields to neutralize gravity and generate propulsion in any direction. If any version of that technology worked, it would explain how aircraft could move at thousands of miles per hour, silent and without jet fuel, unaffected by atmospheric drag. Essentially, these craft would bend space around themselves rather than push through it. A primitive form of what we now call electrogravitic flight. If the Germans managed even limited success before the war ended and those scientists or prototypes were relocated to Antarctica, as rumored, then flying from pole to pole would no longer be science fiction, right? Such craft could traverse the globe through magnetic field lines rather than conventional airspace, making Bird's warning chillingly literal. Another explanation involves natural electromagnetic corridors around the planet. Earth's magnetic poles form a type of energetic highway in the upper atmosphere, where charged particles travel rapidly along field lines from one pole to the other. If a craft could lock onto or ride through those currents, it could theoretically move between poles at speeds impossible by normal aviation. That idea aligns disturbingly well with Bird's enemy aircraft quote. The reference pole-to-pole flight wasn't metaphorical, it was directional, suggesting movement along magnetic lines of force. A more controversial interpretation ties into the hollow earth narrative. If there are vast interior caverns or openings at the pole, as some early explorers and maps have hinted, then flying from pole to pole might not mean across the surface, but through the planet. In that scenario, craft could enter a polar opening, traverse the internal passage, and emerge at the opposite pole in a fraction of time that it would take to fly above ground. So, while conventional science rejects this, several early explorers, including Bird himself, recorded flight logs suggesting warm air currents, lush vegetation, and strange lights are inside the polar region. So now those logs were suppressed for decades, but some versions circulated through intelligence leaks and later resurfaced online. Finally, there's the classified technology angle. Bird may have encountered early aerospace prototypes belonging to a post-war breakaway group. Operation Paperclip had already brought dozens of German engineers into U.S. programs like Bell Aircraft and Northrop. And if those designs were already being secretly tested by 1947, it's conceivable that what Bird saw was not extraterrestrial, but human-made technology, decades ahead of its time. Still, none of those explanations fully dismiss the mystery. Something about those crafts, their speed, and their origin rattled Bird enough to make him speak publicly. A move completely out of character for a decorated military man under strict orders. Decades later, Antarctica became locked under one of the most restrictive international treaties ever created, which I mentioned in part 1. No private nations can claim the land. No one can mine, build, or drill even. Everything south of 60 degrees latitude is now off limits except for tightly controlled research. On paper, it's environmental preservation. In reality, many suspect it's containment. Some believe remnants of the Third Reich still operate there in secrecy, maintaining archives of forbidden science and technology. Others suggest the Nazis uncovered something ancient, something buried before humanity's recorded history, and that the world powers agreed to keep it sealed. That brings us to one of the most curious scientific discoveries of modern times. A strange pulsing signal coming from beneath Antarctica's ice and detected about 25 miles above the surface by a balloon called the Antarctic Impulsive Transient Antenna, ANITA for short. ANITA is a balloon-borne experiment launched over Antarctica, floating roughly 35 to 40 kilometers above ice, designed to detect ultra-high energy cosmic neutrinos interacting in the ice. Between 2016 and 2018, ANITA recorded several anomalous radio pulses that appear to come from below the ice surface, emerging at steep upward angles rather than downward from the atmosphere. These signals defy the standard particle physics expectation. Neutrinos of that energy passing through thousands of kilometers of Earth or ice should not emerge with this signature or angle. Scientists remain unsure what the source is. Among the possibilities are new physics involving exotic particles, unexpected radio wave propaganda under polar ice, or perhaps an unknown subsurface emitter. The notion of energy emerging from deep within the ice aligns perfectly with the image of the planet's hidden core, unleashing outward pulses, a heartbeat from beneath the frozen skin of the Earth. Popular retellings refer to the Anita payload, floating 25 miles above Antarctica, emphasizing the altitude and the uncanny direction of the signal. Energy, rising from below instead of falling from above. It can be interpreted as the planet itself is sending up a pulse, like an unseen heart pushing its rhythm into the sky. It is worth noting, however, that no glowing blob, visible color, or luminous mass has ever been observed in connection with the pulses. The phenomenon is purely radio frequency. The exact origin remains as unconfirmed. No one can say for sure whether it lies near any supposed pole hole or under a specific section of the continent. Yet, the fact that something under all that ice is sending energy outward continues to fascinate both scientists and theorists alike. Now, while the mysteries beneath the surface draw the imagination, strange things also appear on the surface and above it. In late 2024, internet users scouring satellite imagery on Google Maps and Google Earth spotted what looked like a massive rectangular doorway carved into the ice near coordinate 69 degrees 0050 S and 39 degrees 3622 east, southeast of Japan's Showa Station in East Antarctica. The formation looks strikingly geometric, as though a vertical entryway has been cut into a cliff of ice. I have a picture posted of this if you are listening to just a podcast and you're not looking at YouTube, but you can always Google that. Images circled rapidly and conspiracy forums lit up with claims of a secret base or a hidden entrance to the inner Earth. Glaciologists, however, offered a far more mundane explanation. It was likely an iceberg grounded in a shallow sea ice slowly melting in place and creating shadowed shapes that resembled a door. The scientific response was blunt. This was not a built structure, simply nature's geometry playing tricks. Yet, the visual impact of that image cannot be denied. A doorway in the ice leading into blackness becomes a metaphorical entry point into all the world's buried secrets. To grasp the wider pattern, consider the other documented anomalies across the continent. The so-called Blood Falls cascade by Taylor Glacier, where red iron-rich water bleeds from a fissure in the ice like an open wound. Visually, it mirrors the idea of a living earth exhaling from within. The subglacial lakes like Lake Vostok and hundreds of others are hidden chambers of dark water sealed away for millions of years. Worlds within the world, huh? The Weddell Sea's massive reoccurring polynya, a country-sized hole in the sea ice, appears to breathe like a hole in the planet's skin. Beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet, the Wilkes Land gravity anomaly may be the scar of an ancient asteroid impact, or the signature of some deeper structure that predates humanity itself. Antarctica, then, is not the dead continent we imagine. It is alive with movement, humming with frequencies, and occasionally revealing glimpses of geometries that seem too precise for chance. There is the measured hum of the Ross Ice Shelf, whose shifting winds make the ice itself sing in low frequencies, a literal voice of the frozen world Yes, can you imagine a literal voice of the frozen world? I think that's so neat. Of course, I'm big into frequencies anyways. There are a rolling frost balls called Yukamaramo drifting like tiny organisms across the plateau in the eerie third man factor, experienced by explorers who swear someone unseen walks beside them in the endless white silence. Every layer of the continent hides another mystery. Geothermal oasis like the Bunger Hills that stay ice-free all year, subterranean lakes teeming with microbial life that has never seen light, and now the measured radio pulses that defy physics itself. When all of these are taken together, Antarctica stops being just a continent. It becomes a pulse point, kind of a planetary solar plexus, a place where the hidden heart of Earth beats beneath an armor of ice. Whether those anomalies are scientific puzzles, natural wonders, or the faint evidence of something far older and more intelligent than ourselves, one thing is for certain. The world's coldest continent is also its strangest. Beneath the ice, behind the doors, and within the whirling sky above Heard Island, something still stirs, and it's been sending signals, both literal and symbolic, for anyone willing to listen. So now we're going to get into some more strange things. We're going to talk about a story from 1958 when Russian explorers found the Gamburtsev subglacial mountains. Now, they are under 3 miles of ice, but according to scientists, they've been protected for at least 500 million years. So these mountains haven't changed any. Scientists have been looking at drilling through the ice to get to the first rock samples that no one else has touched. And how interesting is that? I think that is simply cool. I'm big into the whole rock thing. All right, so now that we've mentioned that, now I've already touched on the subglacial lakes, but Lake Vostok deserves its own spotlight. So in 2012, Russian scientists drilled into it for the first time, breaching 2 miles of ice to reach water that hadn't been seen in the atmosphere in at least 15 million years. Soon after, strange data came back. Electromagnetic signals, unlike the surrounding background noise. What the, right? They were rhythmic, faint, but distant, as if the lake were alive or transmitting. Later, researchers claimed to have found DNA sequences that didn't match any known organism. Officially, those results were called contamination, of course. Unofficially, they disappeared from further reports. It's an easy bridge between science and a mystery, right? A hidden ocean sealed off from light and time, suddenly sending a pulse once disturbed, like a long dormant system reawakening. Then we have the magnetic anomaly beneath the South Pole. In 2020, satellite magnetometer readings revealed intense magnetic distortion deep below the ice near the geographic South Pole. It's not aligned with the natural north-south geomagnetic field, but scientists suspect an ancient buried meteorite or a dense metallic mass could be there, but the readings fluctuate and no one has drilled there to verify it. Ties elegantly into the heartbeat concept, you know? Think about it. That is pretty interesting in itself. Now, Operation Deep Freeze began in 1955 as a U.S. military campaign to build permanent bases in Antarctica. The official records exist, but several flight logs from the early years were marked classified or destroyed. In one surviving entry, a Navy pilot recorded seeing an unusual glow over the horizon and circular shadows beneath the ice shelf during a magnetic survey flight. The language is restrained, no mention of UFOs, but the implication is clear. You can position this as the silent continuation of Bird's earlier warnings. What he encountered in 47 might never have gone away. It simply slipped beneath the surface, becoming part of the Cold War infrastructure, hidden in plain sight. So now we're going to discuss the warm caverns under the West Antarctic ice sheet. Satellite radar and geothermal studies from the 2010s revealed networks of volcanic heat sources beneath the West Antarctic ice sheet. Dozens of them, including Mount Erebus, still active today. Some of these form vast caves large enough to fly a small plane through. The air inside is warm enough to sustain moss and microbial life. This is like total literal evidence of hollow zones beneath the continent. If you look at it, it also reinforces the idea that Base 211 or any subterranean installation wouldn't have to be science fiction, that it could exist naturally within those geothermal pockets, shielded from detection. Then we have the lost Soviet expedition of 1950, which was one of the archival fragments that are rarely mentioned outside of Russian sources. And there's claims that a Soviet tractor convoy vanished en route to a new station site. Also in 58, only scattered radio transmissions were ever recovered, describing unusual optical effects and skylights moving counter to the stars. The incident was quietly closed as weather interference. Okay, and now we have a modern whisper, which is kind of like satellite silence. So in 2019, an anomaly briefly appeared on multiple Earth observation satellite feeds over East Antarctica. The data blackout lasted only a few minutes, but during the window, independent researchers monitoring the streams noticed a spike in electromagnetic interference on shortwave frequencies worldwide. Yes, worldwide. The agencies involved dismissed it as a data relay issue. Still, the timing aligned suspiciously with the orbit track directly over the Wilkes Land anomaly. Whether coincidence or not, it adds a finishing touch, a modern echo of all the buried energy beneath the ice, still reaching upward, distorting instruments and briefly silencing the machines that watch the world. So now you've got the Reich, the fears of Cold War, the silent persistence of scientists who still dig into ice older than human civilization. The discoveries are measured in static and flickers of magnetism, in pulses that whisper up through miles of frozen crust. Well, the continent guards its secrets well. Yeah, doors that appear and vanish, signals that rise from nowhere, caverns that breathe warmth into a land of perpetual winter. Maybe all of it, every pulse, every anomaly, is the Earth reminding us that life, intelligence, and energy don't end where we expect them to. The planet itself might be more alive than we realize. Its heart beating beneath the South Pole, its lungs exhaling steam through the volcanic caverns, its voice singing across the Ross ice shelf in frequencies only instruments can hear. So for now, we can only stand at the edges of this frozen riddle, listening to the static, watching for the next anomaly, waiting for the ice to part and reveal what's really moving underneath. Because in Antarctica, silence is never truly silent. It's the pause before the next message from the deep. This is Origin Unexplained, and if you have a story that you would like told, or you would like to be in a podcast, email us at originunexplained@gmail.com. And remember, unexplained is UNX, no E in there. PLAINED.
large and unexplained.